Welcome to the Alpha and Omega from the Flood to the Future, the full uncut briefing for Segment 7, the Catching Up.
So I have to ask, have you ever tried to just sit down and read the Book of Revelation and felt like you immediately needed some kind of decoder ring to understand what's going on?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's notoriously one of the most complex, heavily debated, and honestly just culturally pervasive topics out there. Everyone has an opinion on the apocalypse.
Right, which is exactly why we are doing this deep dive today. We're looking at some excerpts from this really fascinating document called BYTE2.docs, specifically Chapter 3.
Yeah, and this document is wild because it essentially tries to map out the architectural blueprints of the apocalypse, like how theologians have argued over these ancient texts for centuries.
And just to be super clear right up front for you listening, our mission today is not about, taking sides or preaching a specific doctrine. We're just impartially reporting on the arguments in the source material.
Exactly. We're not telling you what to believe. We're just unpacking the timeline. And the roadmap for today goes all over the place.
Yeah, it really does.
We're going to trace where the word rapture actually comes from, dig into this massive 1,000-year debate, look at a really mind-bending theory that the apocalypse actually already happened.
Which is crazy to think about.
Right. And then finally, we'll look at how this source applies all these ancient prophecies to a wildly specific digital AI dystopia in the year 2026.
It is quite the journey, so let's just jump right into it. Before we can even build a timeline of the end of the world, we have to talk about the vocabulary.
Yeah, the linguistic side of this is so important.
Because the most famous concept is obviously the rapture, but there's this massive catch that critics love to bring up, which is that the word rapture isn't actually in standard English Bibles.
Right, the classic gotcha argument. People say, well, the word isn't there, so the whole concept is completely made up.
Which, is a bit of a logical fallacy, right? I always think of it like the words Trinity or incarnation.
That's a great comparison.
Yeah, you won't find the exact letters Trinity anywhere on the pages of the Gospels. But early scholars coined the word as a convenient shorthand for a concept that is very clearly in the text.
Exactly. The absence of an English phonetic word doesn't just erase the biblical concept. And for the rapture, this all traces back to a linguistic journey, starting with 1 Thessalonians 4.17.
Okay, so take us back to the original Greek. We're talking around 50 AD, right?
Yeah, around then. So Paul uses this Greek verb, harpazo. And the thing about harpazo is that it is not a gentle word.
Not at all.
No, it means to seize, or to carry off by force, or basically to snatch away suddenly.
The source compares the imagery to, a predator violently snatching its prey out of the brush or a massive whirlwind just ripping a tree out of the ground. It's this visceral, irresistible force.
Right. It's not just like floating peacefully up into the clouds. It's a violent rescue. And so when St. Jerome is translating that Greek into the Latin Vulgate around 382 AD, he needs a Latin word that captures that exact violence.
So what does he go with?
He chooses the verb rapio. Specifically, he writes rabiamur, which translates as we shall be caught up. And the past participle of that is raptus.
Okay, so from raptus, how do we get to rapture in English?
Well, it enters Middle French as ravir. And when it finally hits English, it originally meant being carried away by intense emotion.
Oh, like being enraptured by a beautiful piece of music or something?
Exactly. It wasn't until the 17th and 18th centuries that theologians, basically co-opted the word rapture as the official shorthand for this physical snatching away of the church.
Okay, so now that we know what the event is, how do people decide when it actually happens? Because that seems to be where all the fighting actually starts.
Oh, absolutely. This bridges us right into this framework called dispensationalism.
Which sounds like a very dense academic term.
It does, but it just means viewing history as distinct periods, or dispensations, where God interacts with humanity under different rules. And the biggest key to this framework is that it insists on a highly literal reading of the ancient texts.
Right, specifically regarding the covenants.
Yes. It strictly separates God's plan for national Israel, which is earthly, from his plan for the church, which is spiritual or heavenly.
Okay, unpack the earthly Israel part for me.
So they look at the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis 15, which is a literal promise of land from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates. And then the Davidic covenant in 2 Samuel 7, which guarantees a literal descendant ruling on a physical throne.
But wait, I have to push back here on behalf of the listener. Why couldn't those promises just be spiritual metaphors? Why does it have to be literal dirt and a literal throne?
Well, to a dispensationalist, these aren't just poetic ideas. They treat them like binding legal contracts.
Ah,
Yeah, because God made these promises unconditionally. He legally must physically fulfill them on this actual earth to keep his word. If he spiritualizes them, he's basically breaking a contract.
That makes sense. And the source heavily emphasizes that for modern scholars, the ultimate validation of this literal approach happened in 1948.
Oh, absolutely. The reestablishment of Israel as a nation.
Right. For centuries, scholars were like, well, Israel doesn't exist, so this must be a metaphor. But then 1948 happens, and boom, the prophetic clock starts ticking again.
Exactly. It proved to them that the physical real estate is back in play. But if God has to fulfill these physical contracts on earth, he needs a specific time frame to do it.
Which leads us directly into the great millennial debate from Revelation 20, the famous 1,000-year reign.
Right. And there are basically three views here. First, you have the post-millennial view, which is super optimistic. They think the world just gets progressively more Christianized and better until Christ returns.
Doesn't feel super accurate to the evening news, but okay. What's the next one?
Then there's the premillennial view. This says things get terrible, Christ returns to intervene, and then sets up a literal 1,000-year earthly kingdom.
Okay, and the third?
The third is amillennialism, which the source focuses on quite a bit. Amillennial literally means no millennium. They believe this 1,000-year reign is entirely symbolic and is actually happening right now.
Right now, as in we are in the millennium.
Yeah. They argue Christ's kingdom is spiritual. They point to John 18, where Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world." So the 1,000 years is just a figurative term for a really long time.
And they read Revelation completely differently too, right? Through something called recapitulation.
Exactly. Instead of reading it linearly from chapter 1 to 22, recapitulation means the book just repeats the same story of the church age over and over from different angles.
Okay, but the literalists in the source document have some major critiques of that amillennial view.
Oh, they do. They say it's a slippery slope. If you allegorize these literal promises, where does it stop? But the biggest issue is linguistic. It's the two resurrections problem.
Yes, the Greek word eschatological. Explain how that works, because this is fascinating.
Okay, so in Revelation 20, it talks about a first resurrection and then a second resurrection at the end of the 1,000 years. The exact same Greek word, eschatological, which means came to life, is used for both.
Right.
But amillennialists argue the first resurrection is spiritual, like going to heaven. But the second one is a literal physical resurrection of the body.
Which is wildly inconsistent. You can't take the exact same verb in the exact same paragraph and say, well, this one's a metaphor, but the next one is physical zombies coming out of graves.
Right. The literalists argue you are breaking the rules of language if you do that.
There's another major pushback I want to bring up. Amillennialism claims that Satan is currently bound in an abyss right now, which is why the gospel can spread.
Yes, based on Revelation 20, verses 1 through 3.
But if Satan is locked in a bottomless pit right now, how is he also described by Peter as a roaring lion on the loose looking for someone to devour? Like, how long is the chain on this guy?
That is the exact critique.
Yeah.
It's very hard to look at the horrors of world history and conclude that Satan is currently fully restrained in a pit.
Okay, so the text points to the premillennial view as the most likely, meaning there's a literal future 1,000-year earthly kingdom. But that creates a huge logistical nightmare.
Right, because before that 1,000 years of peace, you have a horrific 7-year period called the Tribulation.
Exactly. So the million-dollar question is, where is the church during all that wrath?
And here is where we get the concept of the escape hatch, the timing of the rapture. The most popular view is pre-tribulation.
Meaning they get out before the 7 years even start?
Yes. The church gets completely out of the way. And they have evidence for this, like 1 Thessalonians 5.9, which says believers are not destined for wrath.
And it also preserves the concept of imminency, right? The idea that he could return at literally any moment.
Exactly. If the rapture happens at the end of the 7 years, there's no surprise. You could just mark your calendar. The pre-trib view also relies heavily on something called the restrainer in 2 Thessalonians.
Right. Paul says there's a force holding back the Antichrist until it is taken out of the way. And scholars say that restrainer is the Holy Spirit indwelling the church. So to remove the restrainer, you have to physically remove the church.
Spot on. And just to clarify, the master comparison table from the source pre-trib distinguishes the rapture as a secret rescue mission in the clouds, completely separate from the second coming, which is a global, visible return to the Mount of Olives terrain.
Okay, but there is a middle ground here, the mid-tribulation view.
Yeah, the mid-trib view says the church actually endures the first 3.5 years, but is raptured right before the final 3.5 years.
I always think of this like a hurricane analogy. It's like you're told you have to sit through the dark, scary outer bands of a Category 5 hurricane, which is the wrath of man and Satan.
Right, because Christians aren't promised immunity from persecution.
Exactly. But you are guaranteed an evacuation helicopter exactly halfway through, right before the catastrophic eye wall hits. Because that eye wall represents the bowl judgments, which is the pure wrath of God.
That's a really great way to put it. And the math they use for that helicopter evacuation is incredibly precise. They point out that Revelation frequently mentions a period of 1,260 days.
Which is exactly 3.5 years on the ancient 360-day prophetic calendar.
Precisely. And they tie Paul's mention of the last trumpet directly to the seventh trumpet in Revelation 11, which sounds exactly at that midpoint.
Okay, so we've been talking this whole time about future timelines, but we have to throw a massive curveball that challenges this entire premise.
Oh, this is the plot twist. What if almost all of this already happened?
Yes. Introduce us to preterism.
So preterism comes from the Latin word praeter, meaning past. It's the theory that these prophecies were mostly fulfilled in the first century.
And they base this on the time markers in the text, right? Like Jesus saying in Matthew 24, this generation will not pass away until these things happen.
Exactly. And Revelation itself opens by saying, these things must soon take place.
Which honestly is a really compelling argument. If a text says something will happen soon to the people standing right there listening, do we break the plain reading of the text to say it actually meant 2,000 plus years later?
That's the preterist exact point. So under partial preterism, they interpret the beast, the famous 666, as the Roman Emperor Nero Caesar.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and the Great Tribulation wasn't a future global war. It was the horrific Roman siege of Jerusalem in AD 70, where the temple was destroyed. And Christ's coming was a judgment coming upon the old covenant system, using the Roman army.
Now, partial preterists still believe in a future final resurrection. But there's also full preterism, which says literally everything happened in AD 70.
Yeah, and full preterism is widely considered heretical by mainstream Christianity because it denies any future physical resurrection of the dead.
Plus, there's a huge reality check needed for full preterism. Revelation 21 promises a new earth with no more pain or crying.
Right.
If that happened in AD 70, they must be ignoring the news because the world is still full of suffering. And doesn't the dating of the book completely ruin the preterist view anyway?
It's a huge problem for them, yes. Early church fathers placed the writing of Revelation around AD 95 during Domitian's reign. If it was written 25 years after the fall of Jerusalem, it couldn't possibly be a prophecy about it.
Okay, so if preterism says the apocalypse is ancient history, the source document does this violent pivot and yanks us all the way back to the present, specifically applying these prophecies to the digital tech landscape of 2026.
This is where it gets incredibly sci-fi. The text looks at King Nebuchadnezzar's dream from the book of Daniel about this giant statue made of different metals.
Right, the head of gold, chest of silver, thighs of bronze, but we're skipping straight to the legs of iron.
Yeah, traditionally the iron is the Roman Empire, but this source reinterprets the iron as the automated, unyielding, conscienceless logic of a machine.
And it focuses on the feet of the statue, which are made of a mix of iron and baked clay. The source applies this directly to 2026 as a modern Tower of Babel built of digital code.
Exactly. They call it human-AI symbiosis, or humanos. It's the attempt to merge silicon, which is the iron or AI, with the soul, which is the clay, or humanity.
But the prophecy says it fails to cleave. Just as iron and clay don't mix, this tech system completely fails because a machine lacks a soul. I kind of think of it like trying to write a human heartbeat into a line of Python code.
That's a perfect analogy. The materials fundamentally reject each other.
It's fascinating. And then what happens?
Well, the vision ends with a stone representing Christ returning to strike the iron and clay feet, entirely shattering this 2026 digital prison.
It's just a wildly modern, ultra-specific application of ancient prophecy. We have covered so much ground today.
We really have. From the linguistic leap of Harpazo to the 1948 clock, all the debates over the 1,000 years, the mind-bending preterist view of AD 70, all the way to a 2026 AI dystopia.
Yeah, and whether you are looking at this as a theological guidebook or just a fascinating piece of literary and historical analysis, it just proves how deeply these texts shape our cultural understanding of the future.
It really does. It frames how people view technology, geopolitics, everything.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, drawing on that human OS concept. Even if you view the Book of Revelation purely as an allegory, isn't there something profoundly relevant about that warning of the iron and clay?
Oh, definitely.
Because as we rush toward brain-computer interfaces and AI integration, we really have to ask ourselves, at what point does upgrading our hardware mean we lose the clay that makes us human in the first place? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you for joining us for the full uncut brief of Segment 7, the Catching Up 4 on the Go. See the digital archives in your audio app.